Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Nur Hasha Kristina binti Syahrul Helmi and my metric number is 1240684. Today I'll be presenting the case of Ainan bin Mahamud against Syed Abu Bakar bin Habib Yusoff, which was heard in the Supreme Court of the Federated Malay States during British colonial rule. At the time, the Supreme Court of the Federated Malay States was the highest judicial authority for the region prior to the establishment of the modern Federal Court of Malaysia after the independence. The case focused on the legitimacy of Ainan under both civil and Islamic law, highlighting the presumption of legitimacy under Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950. This is the content that I will be present to you today, which is introduction, objective, facts of the case, issues, legal provisions, judgment, discussion, and conclusion. First, let's look at the introduction. The plaintiff, which is Ainan bin Mahamud, sought a declaration from the court confirming that he was the legitimate and lawful son of his father, which is Mahamud. The dispute centered around inheritance and the legitimacy of several children, particularly whether a child born within 6 months of the parents' marriage could be deemed legitimate under Islamic law and Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950. The presumption in Section 112 was crucial to protect Ainan's status as legitimate. The plaintiff sought a declaration of legitimacy under Section 42 of the Specific Relief Enactment, which is now replaced by the Specific Relief Act 1950 in Malaysia. This section allows a person to file a suit to obtain a declaration of their legal status or rights. In this case, Ainan sought the court's confirmation that he was the legitimate son of his father Mahamud. This declaration was important for Ainan to establish his legitimacy that would confirm his inheritance rights and legal standing. Now, let's move on to the objectives of the presentation, which is first, to discuss and explain the case of Ainan bin Mahamud against Syed Abu Bakar bin Habib Yusoff and others. Second, to determine the applicability of Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950, which presumes legitimacy unless non-access between the parents is proven, and whether this statutory presumption applies to Muslim. And lastly, to explain how the court upheld the presumption of legitimacy and its reasoning. Now, let's move on to the facts of the case. The case of Ainan bin Mahamud against Syed Abu Bakar bin Habib Yusoff focuses on the legitimacy of Ainan and his siblings, as well as their inheritance rights. Ainan, the plaintiff, sought a court declaration confirming that he was the legitimate and lawful son of his father Mahamud after some of Mahamud's other children challenged his legitimacy. The dispute centered on whether a child born within 6 months of the parents' marriage could be considered legitimate under both Islamic law and Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950. Section 112 presumes that a child born during a valid marriage is legitimate unless there is clear evidence to the contrary. In this case, the court examined whether there was evidence proving that Ainan's father Mahamud had no access to the mother during the period of conception, which would rebut the presumption of legitimacy. The court found that no such evidence was presented, leading to the conclusion that Ainan was indeed the legitimate son of Mahamud. This decision not only affirmed Ainan's legitimacy but also confirmed his right to inherit from his father, emphasizing the importance of legal presumption in determining family and inheritance matters. Now, let's move on to the issue in this case, which is whether Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950 applies to Muslims. Now, let's take a closer look at the legal provision that were related to this case. First, Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950. This section established a legal presumption of legitimacy. It states that a child born during a valid marriage is presumed legitimate unless there is clear evidence proving that the father had no access to the mother during the time of conception. The purpose of this provision is to provide protection and stability to children born within marriage, ensuring they are not unfairly labelled illegitimate. In the case of Ainan bin Mahamud, this provision was important. The court applied his presumption because no evidence was provided to rebut it, meaning no one could prove that the father, which is Mahamud, had no access to the mother. Next, Section 42 of the Specific Relief Enactment. This section allows a person to file a suit to obtain a declaration of their legal status or rights. It provides individuals the ability to clarify disputes about their identity, character, or property rights. In this case, Ainan used Section 42 to ask the court to declare him as the legitimate son of his father. This declaration was essential for Ainan to secure his inheritance right, which were being challenged by the defendant. These provisions played a vital role in resolving the dispute by providing a legal framework for determining legitimacy and protecting Ainan's right. They illustrate how statutory law ensures fairness and stability in personal and property-related disputes. Now, let's move on to the court's judgment. First, universal application of Section 112. The court ruled that Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950 applies universally, including to Muslims, and presumes that any child born within a valid marriage is legitimate. This presumption can only be challenged with clear evidence proving that husband had no access to the wife during conception. Since no such evidence was provided, the court upheld Ainan legitimacy. Second, balancing Islamic and civil law. While Islamic law uses slightly different standards for determining legitimacy, particularly regarding the timeline of births within marriage, the court clarified that civil laws, like the Evidence Act, govern issues of legitimacy unless specifically excluded by statute. This ensured consistency in applying the law and provided legal certainty for Ainan. Now, let's discuss the key legal issues in this case. Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950 presumes that the children born within a lawful marriage are legitimate, applying to everyone, including Muslims, unless stated otherwise. In cases involving Islamic law, legitimacy is traditionally determined by gestation periods and birth timing, which may differ from statutory presumptions. However, the court upheld Section 112, which protects children born within marriage regardless of timing, emphasizing that the presumptions of legitimacy can only be rebutted with evidence of non-access between the husband and wife during the conception period. Since no such evidence was presented, the court upheld that the presumption of legitimacy. These issues demonstrate how the law protects the rights of children and balances statutory provisions with religious principles. In conclusion, the case of Ainan bin Mahamud against Syed Abu Bakar bin Habib Yusoff highlights how Section 112 of the Evidence Act 1950 protects children's legitimacy and inheritance right, confirming that civil laws govern legitimacy even for Muslims, unless explicitly stated otherwise. That's all from me. Thank you.